Hey, let's start the show.
For Friday, July 15th, 2022. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Hello, and welcome to the show this week. I am Norm, and joining me, well, some familiar faces for Tested viewers. Kishore is here. Kishore, that's like 2 weeks in a row. It's a
I
good
know.
streak.
I'm on a streak, and this is a good week because it was science with an exclamation point instead of
Oh,
more science.
science fiction. We're going to be talking about those things, and no better person to join us for those topics than Ariel Waldman. Ariel, good to see you. Great to see you. How's it going?
Great to be back.
Things going well in your parts of the world?
Yeah, lots of editing and preparing. Editing the final bits of the manuscript for my Out There book and preparing to go back to Antarctica in December. So that's been occupying most of my time.
Oh,
I hear December is beautiful in Antarctica.
Totally. Almost t-shirt weather.
That's amazing. I think last time we were on, we talked about your trip, the plans for your trip to go back, and I'm sure you can't be over prepared for that. I mean, you're gonna be out for months at a time, so we're looking very forward to your trip and the reports of your trip. And you now have like ways for people to follow you. I mean, outside of just social media, but to get updates of what you'll be doing there.
Yeah. So right now I'm in full prep mode. So I've just physically qualified to go to Antarctica, which involved an extensive doctor's appointment and dentist appointment and 4 vials of blood. And I got the okay to go. So I'm okay to go. And right now I'm also studying to get a drone pilot's license because part of my project of going back to Antarctica this time around is not only to look at all the microscopic critters that live under the ice, but I'm going to be doing sort of an orders of magnitude documentary looking at things that are microbial to things that are, insect size. There's no insects in Antarctica, but, sort of macro, to also looking at drone footage and satellite footage. So that's all getting put together while I'm in Antarctica for 2 months. And if you want updates while I'm in the field about what my day-to-day life is like while I'm there, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I've got a newsletter sign up that we'll put a link to in the YouTube description. So if you want to get updates while I'm in Antarctica starting around December, just go ahead and sign up to the newsletter, and I'll be sending all sorts of things into your inbox.
Oh my gosh. You said orders of magnitude, which of course makes me think of course, Okay to Go Contact opens famously
Mhm.
with a tribute to the Powers of 10 Eames video, which I don't even know if like the youth today remember this. I'm sure us growing up, this is like a staple of science classes. The teacher, maybe the substitute teacher, would bring in the VHS tape, put it in, and we'd watch this classic Powers of 10 video, which I'm sure that video encourage more kids to be scientists, and maybe like the combination of science and art than a lot in that generation.
I'm
Yeah,
sure calling them
I'm
the youth is going to get them super interested in that
That's more a
video too.
reflection of me than it is, of them. Hello, fellow kids, right?
Yeah. I'm totally taking my inspiration from the Eames Powers of 10 video because it's something that in my journey from going to art school into science, it was shown in both art school classes and in some of my microscopy science classes as being this definitive thing. And I love that it's a video that was created by a pair of designers. So totally taking my inspiration from that. And so this documentary about Antarctica that I'm going to produce with the help of National Geographic is going to be really being able to look at Antarctica through all these different orders of magnitude, because I feel like so much of the responsibility of going to Antarctica and the fact that very few people do get the chance to go there is what can we do to really show just how amazing and incredible this space on our own planet is. And I always like it because, to me, if you're a space exploration geek, Antarctica is like our closest thing to going to outer space. It's Mars-like. There's a lot of really cool astronomy being done there. It's just so amazing. So the more ways I can figure out to sort of bring it home with me and share it with everyone, the better.
Away missions and everything. Yeah.
I'm so curious, as just a technology nerd, what drone are you thinking about flying down there?
I'm going to use the DJI Mavic 3.
Awesome. I will tell you, when Joey and I did the expedition to the high Arctic, drones were, they were very capable, not quite as mature as they were today. And like, we brought the giant Inspire drone that DJI had made, because we thought, powerful rotors, a good camera. It was just, it took so much of the case for it, just took so much of our payload, and our allowable luggage that we could bring. And one of our fellow travelers had like the Phantom at the time. I think it was the Phantom 4, and was able to do so much more with a more maneuverable, smaller drone, and it had all the same GPS capabilities. And now that Mavic line, I think it's absolutely the right way to go, because you can put it in your backpack, and the footage looks great from it. And the power runs, and it's made for expeditions like this. Yeah, so I'm very excited what you'll bring back and the footage you'll be capturing from there. You also mentioned editing. So you announced a while back that you're working on a new book. Is that what this is for?
Yeah. So, if some of the longtime tested viewers will know, I had a show called Off-World Untested, where we looked at like all things space exploration and pop culture. And so I took that show and I used it as inspiration to produce a new book called Out There, that's due out in August 2023. So about a year from now. And it's really exciting. We're doing kind of the same thing of like looking at the science behind sci-fi movies and TV shows, and breaking down, sort of both the interesting science behind them, but also the interesting cultural aspects, and having interesting conversations. So that's all going into a book. It'll be beautifully illustrated, and yeah, it's going to be really exciting. And you might even see some of your own favorite tested characters in the book as well, Norm and Kishore and Adam, and just a lot of amazing people that we've had on the show, and so many more.
I love that. And we'll have a link in the description if you're watching the YouTube video, for where people can follow and get an update when the book becomes available for pre-order. And yeah, Out There, cannot wait for that.
Yeah. I have to say, just because I don't know what quote you pull, I'm just going to defensively say that quote was taken out of context. I'm just going to go on the record right now.
I'm going to run it by you, Kishore. I'll run it by. If Kishore magically doesn't appear in the book, it's because he just disagreed with it.
It's just a safe thing to say, given the stuff that comes out of my mouth.
Kishore, how are things going with you?
Really well. Like I found this week, partially because of all the conversation that was going on because of JWST, to be one of the more energizing weeks in a long time. I feel like we've been living in these times that have been challenging and difficult, and the news is more morbid day by day, and we got this like glimmer of hope, and it was just really beautiful and just energizing to me personally. And there's nothing like having a beer and just staring at beautiful images on your computer screen, and then having all of the requisite dreams later on because of it.
Oh, yeah, the most expensive wallpapers, desktop wallpapers that ever created. And before we dive into JWST, I did want to bookend something NASA related, because Ariel, what was it, 2019? We went to the launch of Mars Insight, and
Yes.
the rover landed. It did its earthquake studies, its seismic studies, and
Mars quakes. Let's get it right.
and that's right. And it's about to wrap up, right? It's operations.
Yeah. It's had a good run, but it's ready to say night, and I still hope that we can go to a rocket launch that won't be clouded with fog like ours was. It was
That marine
definitely,
layer.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. California launches are nothing to joke about.
They're just like San Francisco 4th of July fireworks. They're completely obscure. And like, let's not lose total hope for InSight. I mean, Mark Watney 20 years from now will get there and somehow magically come across InSight and use it to get back to Earth. So, yes, but primary mission shut down. And it's both sad, but also outlived its mission, just like pretty much every NASA mission over the last 10 years.
That's the over preparation and engineering that goes into it, exceeding expectations. And so that leads us to the big story in science this week, which is the first images from James Webb Space Telescope, GWST. Before we get into like the details of what the images were, I just want to get a sense of where you guys were when the first images dropped, because just following Science Communicator and Space Twitter on the 12th when the photos were first dropped, it was it was like this big, almost like pop culture event. It was so emotional and it felt like nerve wracking for so many people.
Yeah, it was hilarious kind of to watch the watchers, so to speak. It was kind of pandemonium because it had been announced last minute that Biden was going to be the one to introduce the first image from what I'm going to call the Welly Space Telly. There's so many alternative names that are delightful, and so everyone was like, okay, we've got to wait for Biden. And then it got delayed by 30 minutes, and then it got delayed by an hour, and then it got delayed by over an hour. And so I had been in my studio being a nerd, cleaning my microscopes, thinking, okay, I'm just going to come on like after it's been announced and just let the images flood my eyes. And I came on and all I could see was just everyone losing their shit over, waiting and having like this kind of call holding music being played. And it was just kind of delightful to see everyone so excited and even just have that moment of how much everyone was just waiting for these things and waiting for their minds to be blown, which is, yeah, it's nice.
I initially came in with not low expectations, but like tamped down expectations because JWST has been one of the more infamous projects for being delayed and over budget and just sort of rife with problems. For a long time, like you can go back on this podcast and hear me say JWST has been delayed again at least a half dozen times. And so I kind of came in with those sort of like tamp down expectations. And then there was, even though the unfolding sequence went super well, there was news of a micrometeoroid hitting one of the panels. And I was like, oh, maybe we're not going to get like the quality. Like I just kind of tamped it down. And as I was listening to the hold music for an hour in my car, I like had to go to camp pickup. My son got into the car and he's like, "What are you listening to?" And I'm like, "The most exciting hold music ever." um, I think it's partially because I've been like waiting for some positive science news for a while that I got hyped up. It's definitely there were some people that I felt like were a little over the top with how explosive they were, but I think it's because of the moment that we live in. And um, I just remember somebody tweeting, and this is how I felt in all caps, like "shut up and show the images," and that's like immediately. That's how I felt when they were doing the unveils. I just wanted to see stuff, and I just think NASA had like a certain um, communication brilliance in terms of how they chose these first few images to unveil. So we had the comparison to what Hubble was able to see that really kind of took us on this arc of what JWST is going to be capable of unveiling. And we'll get into that in a second, but I just think there was a certain brilliance in like taking us by the places they chose through this arc of progression that really kind of illuminates what we're going to be able to see into the future.
Well, help me better understand the differences then between Hubble, launched in 30 years ago now, and what James Webb can do from a technology standpoint, from a positioning standpoint. It's fundamentally still capturing infrared, right? Using giant mirrors, and being placed, from what I understand, just further away or in a larger, camera sensor equivalent, right?
Hubble didn't have infrared equipment
Ah,
like this. So this is completely different imaging. And part of the reason um, Hubble didn't have infrared equipment is that infrared is really well absorbed by our atmosphere. And even though Hubble is above our atmosphere, it's just not in a good position. So JWST had to fly out to the Lagrange point, the L2 point, which is about 1 million miles away. To essentially be in a position where there wasn't sort of atmospheric absorption of the IR spectrum to sort of unveil this. And JWST basically has 4 pieces of equipment on it. Most of them are, 2 of them are basically infrared detectors, and 2 of them are spectrographs. And the infrared detectors are the ones that were kind of on full display in some of these early graphs. We'll get to the spectrographs as well. But the infrared uh, camera, I think the primary thing that I think is super important is gas and stellar dust that's out there in the cosmos. Really, it's hard to see past that. A And infrared allows us to see essentially through those dust clouds to what's behind them in really interesting ways. And then there's a ton of other advantages, but it allows us to see a different type of spectrum here that I think is really important.
Yeah,
Ariel, what stuck out to you? Yeah.
yeah, well, so the infrared thing. So, yeah, being able to peer past all that space dust and space gas really gives us clearer views of a lot of things. One of my favorite space telescopes that did a similar thing, but looking at our own galaxy, is the Spitzer Space Telescope. So that looked and gave us really gorgeous pictures of our Milky Way galaxy that are unlike anything we've seen before, and really fundamentally changed how we view what our own galaxy looks like. But the other really cool thing about using infrared, both from near infrared and mid infrared, on the Jelly Welly Space Telly, as I will continue calling it, is that early galaxies and early stars had their light in ultraviolet and visible. And if you know anything about the electromagnetic spectrum, it's that those are like much shorter waves. And so the early galaxies and the early stars were shining in ultraviolet and visible. And as that light travels through the universe and the universe itself expands, those light waves that are usually really short get stretched out, and they get stretched out into infrared. And so one of the reasons why we can see some of the earliest galaxies and stars with this space telescope is because that light that's reaching us is now stretched into infrared. So the only way we can see a lot of these early galaxies and stars is by looking in infrared, because that light has been stretched out. And so that's one of the things that makes this telescope really cool, is being able to see into stuff that we haven't been able to see from the time our universe was as early as like 100 million years old, which is
crazy.
Just difficult to even think about, but really cool.
Yeah. And when you say 100 million years old, that is very close to the beginning of the universe compared to how old we think the universe is, right? Like
Yeah,
over 13.
it's so close to the Big Bang that it actually gets close to the time where our universe was not transparent. So in the very early days of our universe, everything was opaque. Light could only sort of like very shortly bounce around between all the objects. I'm saying objects is a vague term in the universe. And so it was only as the universe got older and expanded that it became transparent. So the fact that we can see out into space and see light from distant objects at all is due to the universe transitioning into a transparent universe. So the fact that we can even get close to that is just really cool.
Yeah, there's 4 main things that JWST is going to allow us to do. As Ariel said, look at the earliest part of the universe that we can. So like the universe is like 13.8 billion years old. We can probably go like 13.5, 13.6 billion years back with JWST. We also get to look at how galaxies, far away galaxies, our own galaxy, how they're shifting over time. We can look at the life cycle, both the birth of new stars. And then finally, the one that I'm most interested in is we get to look at the spectrographs of atmospheres of exoplanets. And by that, we can look for particular chemical signatures that may indicate things like water or hopefully in the future signs of carbon, which will indicate a certain type of sophistication or sophistication is the right word, a certain type of potential composition on that planet.
And NASA being really savvy about the way they're releasing these images, is the expectation now that we're going to start getting a steady stream of amazing new imagery on a regular cadence? I know, like astronomers and researchers have time booked to do their research with the telescope, but what's the anticipation for how we're going to start getting stuff for during the lifetime of JWST?
I think there's two ways to look at this. So the deep field image, which is the first image released, Hubble took a very similar image. There's some really great overlays of like comparing them back and forth. Hubble took like almost a month, I believe, to take that image, just because of how much time you need to expose to get that light collected. JWST did it in about like 12 hours. So they're able to image more because of how much more sensitive it is, how much more light it can detect. Hubble was transmitting about 100 gigs of data a week, or still is. JWST is 50 terabytes a week of data. So it is a whole factor difference here. So it's pretty significant. And because of maneuvers that were made going out there and ways they were able to conserve fuel, the early estimate is that JWST will be able to have a 20-year service mission life. The initial estimates were 5 years. So to get up to 20 means we'll be able to run a whole lot of experiments or look at different areas for a whole lot of time. There's competitive applications that are well underway for people to book time to look at various different parts of the sky.
The textbooks of our children's future are going to be fast evolving if people still are buying textbooks and replacing all those Hubble photos. That's awesome. Anything that either of you are particularly excited to see images of, or just kind of ready to let it be released and get those wallpapers changed?
I'm ready for everything. All of it. It all sounds amazing. But of the the images that have been released already, the thing that I really love about them is how much they really provoke you to think deeply about our own existence on Earth. So the first deep field image that came out this week was something where you're just like, oh yeah, cool. And then you're like, wait a second, and you start zooming in, and you're just like, each of those is their own galaxies, and you start just going like, oh my God, there's so like our own galaxy is so expansive as it is, and thinking that there's all these other ones out there, it really provokes you to think about life in the universe, which I love. The other thing that it provokes is, I believe that image was about 4.6 billion years old. So we're looking at stuff as it existed before our Earth existed, like right around the start of our own planet. And so, our entire planet wasn't even in existence. And now we've had a planet for, 4.5 point something years, or billion years. And we build these telescopes and we look out, and this is what we see existed before we even had a ground to stand on. That is really just amazing to think about, and amazing to think about that you're not only looking at all these galaxies that exist, but you're also looking at them before we even existed. And what have those galaxies been up to since then? Certainly we've been up to quite a bit here on Earth. And the other image that came out that sort of made me contemplate the Earth a bit is there was the Southern Ring Nebula, which is a planetary nebula. And the planetary nebula, there's really beautiful image, kind of circular dust and gas image. Planetary nebula, the name of it is actually not precise. It doesn't mean planets. It means like a circular nebula. And these actually happen when certain stars die. And this is sort of their last gasp of all the space dust and gas that they put out into the universe that then might go on to build future planets and stars. What I find really fascinating about that is that recent modeling over the last few years says that actually our own solar system may turn into a planetary nebula at the last gasp of our star. So when thinking about how we all turn into space dust and space gas, and then that dissipates and might go on to form future things, we can actually look at these planetary nebulas and say, that might be the future of what I am billions of years from now. So again, just being able to think deeply about these things is such a gift.
Yeah, what I love about that Southern Nebula image is you can see a red giant that is like throwing off all that stuff, like the gas and dust, and that's like, that's the future of our sun potentially. But then there's also like a little white dwarf that's next to it. And if you look at the IR image, like one of the IR images on the NASA site, not the one that was sort of most famously released, but there's other images too. You can actually see through the dust a little bit more clearly to the white dwarf that's next to the red giant. It's pretty spectacular. I agree with everything that Ariel said. It's yes, all of the above. I was really struck by the Karina Nebula photo for multiple reasons. I think the stellar nursery aspects of seeing how stars form is functionally just so fascinating. I think you can't look at the deep field without having a sense of feeling small but filled with awe and wonder at the same time, because every point of light in that picture is 100 billion stars as you're looking at each of those galaxies. That just is incredible. But the thing that I'm most interested in practically are the spectrographs of exoplanets. I just think the ability for us to look at atmospheres of planets, I mean, everyone's going to go directly to like, are we going to see conditions that would be conducive for life? And I think that's massively important. But we learn a lot about planetary formation and life cycle by looking at the atmospheres of different planets. And like that first spectrograph that showed water in an atmosphere, that was a gas giant. And but that's like, so that extends our knowledge of a planetary formation. And it's also just sort of a technological achievement in a different way, in the sense that planets are like whizzing by at exceptional speed, just like everything is. But like they're also like rotating, going through all sorts of motions. And JWST can actually look at an exoplanet if it's in the right conditions, moving about. It was designed to pick up a planet that's going about the speed of Mars through space, but they were able to increase that. So it's about twice the speed of Mars of a planet going through. So it gives me hope that we'll actually be able to see atmospheres of some rocky planets and understand some of those conditions. And planetary formation has just a kind of relatability that I think is undeniable when it comes down to it. We haven't even mentioned black holes. That's how freaking cool this is. Because I think one of the powers of JWST is that it works in concert with other telescopes that are looking at different things as well. We can talk about this forever, but I'll just stop there.
I love how excited both of you are. And of course, as all this imagery from our new long range sensor now propagates through the science communities, it's going to bleed into, storytellers in the pop culture space, and maybe inform how, the science fiction that we love gets told and gets shown and displayed, as we've seen with, black holes specifically. And that takes us to the other major topic. The other reason I wanted both of you on the show this week is I want to talk Star Trek, and I want to talk specifically Strange New Worlds, the spin-off of Star Trek Discovery. It's on Paramount Plus. The first season just wrapped up, and I understand, Ariel, you're able to watch the first full season.
Yes, I've seen the full season.
Kishore, you're halfway through, a couple episodes in.
It's okay. I kind of know where the story will end up.
And you know what? That's kind of a theme for this. Before sharing my thoughts, Ariel, what did you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. I think, I've been with every Star Trek, I kind of, I have my own personal thoughts, but I also pay a lot of attention to what other people think. And it's been really nice to see that a lot of people are like, yes, this Star Trek has arrived. This is what I want. I don't want like a huge plot that I have to pay attention to through an entire season. I want sort of the, adventure of the week. And so in that way, Strange New Worlds definitely delivers. My personal thoughts on Strange New Worlds is that, I enjoy it. It's nice. I think it is like, TNG or something. And in so much as like, I can put it on and I don't have to pay attention to every single minute to enjoy it. Take that for what you will. Like in that way, I think it accomplishes what a lot of Star Trek accomplished in the past. On the other hand, there's the odd episode or two where I'm just like, this is not my speed. This is not my thing. And I think, if you've seen the whole season, you probably know like at least one of the episodes I'm referring to where it's like classic Star Trek.
Very classic. Costumes. I would say there's costuming, there's zaniness.
Yes. Yeah. But I enjoy it. And the thing that I'll say that I enjoy the most, where I'm just like, this is, miles ahead of a lot of the other recent Star Treks we've been seeing, is that it's just such a confident crew. And it's just so nice to see a crew that I really enjoy and getting to dive into each of them. And that, they have uncertainties and doubts, but they can confidently tackle them and address them. And it's, some of the things I think, in Discovery that I always struggled with were the fact that you have crew members who just are so full of doubt and uncertainty that they are paralyzed by it constantly. Whereas with Strange New Worlds, the crew really, has come into their own and has a better sense of themselves and what they need to do to figure themselves out. And just seeing that confidence portrayed on screen, I think speaks to me a lot more about, giving me hope and helping me figure out, how to address things in my own life, which I think is what Star Trek, at its core tries to do for people.
Yeah, I completely agree about the confidence part and competency, right? If this is supposed to be the Enterprise, the flagship of the Federation, they explicitly talk about how the crew here, even the cadets, are Uhura, who's a cadet here, basically in her residency, touring the different departments, made it out of thousands of applicants. This is the best of the best, and so it becomes more believable when the drama comes from how this crew can work together to solve these fantastical situations than some of the personal drama that becomes the core of the other shows. Completely take the point about the non-serialized aspect of it as well. I think that was a specific direction the showrunners wanted to go in, where throughout the 10 episodes of the season there are story arcs. The characters do evolve and change, and there is like a threads. It's kind of a nice achievement that every character has a moment or grows as a character, but it's not week to week of cliffhangers. And one of the benefits of that is that they allow time to pass. So you get a better sense of the world building, right? If they're on a 5-year mission, it's not 10 days that goes by over a span of 10 episodes. It could be a full year. And with time passing, it's believable that things happen off camera between episodes that make you feel like it is a real world and a real environment that they're living in and a real mission. I really enjoy that aspect.
So we know where the story ends because, it's Christopher Pike. We meet him early in the original series. So we know where this ends up. How much more of this do you want? And how far do you want them to go? I mean, it's like a 10-year period that they have to potentially explore?
So let me help explain some of that for folks who never watched the original series. Chris Pike was the original captain of the Enterprise, and he was only in the unaired pilot called The Cage that was produced. It's very different uniforms. Spock was there as his commanding officer, but the actor didn't want to do the show and commit to the show, and so that was never used, but still became canonical in I think the first season, like the 12th episode. There was an episode called The Menagerie, two-parter, where they basically brought the character back, not the actor, but brought the character back. And this is where you get Christopher Pike's ultimate fate, where he's bound to that space wheelchair. He's disfigured. He can only communicate in beeps, yes or no. But in flashbacks, they were able to pull footage from the pilot, The Cage, and use that in the episode. It kind of gives him this very traumatic character arc, and Strange New Worlds leans into that. And of course, there's also been Christopher Pike in the J.J. Abrams movies, which I think was a really well fleshed out character, and he has ultimately a different fate. I think from what you've seen so far, Kishore, they lean into the fact that the twist here is Pike knows his fate. Timey-wimey time crystals have allowed him to see his future, and it becomes a burden on him mentally. But I'll let you know, they don't actually dwell on that too much. The rest of the show, it is there, and they do address it at some point, but it does not become the crux of his character. He's just being the captain as he would normally run the ship for most of the show, which I like. And what they do in the finale, I think, is a incredible achievement. I won't spoil the season finale, but it is a direct tie-in to the original series. Who are any of your favorite characters so far? Well, new cast, new crew, new actors. It's always a thing that we kind of wrestle with new shows, like in the Star Trek universe.
Yeah, I was talking about this with my husband. I think my vote goes to Erica because they're, just so confident and sure, and also funny. But my husband was saying his favorite character is Nurse Chapel, which I keep referring to lovingly as the Burning Man girl, because she just reminds me of someone straight from Burning Man.
She's so hip. She's so hip.
But she's growing on me because they do develop her character more, and there's clearly a longer arc sort of happening in the background with her. So yeah, those were our favorite two of the series. And yeah, it's nice because when trying to think like who my favorite character was, I mean, I like a lot of them. There's very few that I don't like. One that I actually don't like is Kirk's brother. He's really
Sam. Yeah, with his mustache. It's like he's like a contest winner. He's like, oh, I'm on Star Trek now. Let me be full of personality. I completely agree.
Yeah, he's a bit much, but yeah, it's a good problem to have. Like that it's kind of difficult for me to pick my favorite. What about you, Kishore?
I've only seen 3 episodes, and I think we're not giving Captain Pike his due. I think he's been like in the era of Star Trek shows that we've been in, recently, I think starting from Enterprise through to Picard and Discovery, I think we have like a captain that feels more like a throwback captain. And I've actually enjoyed how Anson Mount has kind of managed it. I would say least favorite through the first few episodes has been Spock. I think he's been really flat.
We got to discuss this. Okay. I agree with Anson Mount. I think his Pike is confident. It's almost a hybrid of the father figure that Bruce Greenwood did in the 2009 Star Trek, where he's been experienced. You could kind of have your faith in him, but he also has a little bit of the not necessarily swashbuckler, but the savviness of a Kirk, like just the charm of a Kirk. Right. So I think he as a performance, he does a nice hybrid. I actually really love Ethan Peck's Spock. And so many of the main casts are, they're characters that are brought back from the original series, from Spock, from number 1, Una, who's played by Rebecca Rain, to even the Doctor, Mega, who I love as a performer. He was in Dune. Great actor, great voice. Um, I I didn't see the season of Discovery that had Spock with when it was introduced with the beard, but I think I really like this performance even more so than I think the Zachary Quinto. I think he does a Nimoy impression as well as like a Vulcan really well.
What I was really surprised by was the fact that he was in Discovery, uh and what was telling was I was like, oh, this guy's much better than the guy that they hired for Discovery. And I was like, because I did not like him in Discovery at all. It was emo Spock. It was like so obnoxious. And so I was like, this guy is much better. And I was like, oh, it's the same guy. Oh, good. Well, good for him. He's much better in this.
And he's emo. I mean, the whole thing of Spock is he wrestles with his emotions and his humanity. When you get to I'm so excited for you to get to episode 4, Kishore, because episode 4 is a proper Wrath of Khan style action adventure, which is extremely thrilling. They do like submarine style ships chasing each other, cat and mouse game, Hunt for Red October style that the Wrath of Khan was all about. They do that really well in episode 4. And then episode 5, I think, might be my favorite because it's after the intensity of an episode 4, it's lighthearted, it's funny, and it's really, I think, very Star Trek in its writing. I don't want to spoil too much because I want you going cold, but Spock is a big part, and T'Pring as well from the original series. Spock's fiance, I think the actress who plays her is absolutely nailing, making it her own as well, the role of T'Pring. It's funny, in the original series, Mitchell Roddenberry, she wasn't married to Gene Roddenberry, the creator, at that point, but she played 3 characters in Star Trek, right? Well, 4 if you count. She did Loxana Troi in Next Generation, and she's the voice of the computer, of course, in Next Generation. But in the original series, she was Nurse Chapel as well as Number One. And so it's interesting in Strange New Worlds that you have 2 different actors taking on that role. And I think Rebecca Romijn does an amazing job as Number One. I really love her as not the Riker, but as the confidant, as the commander, the one that is, basically between her and Spock. Those are the people that Pike goes to, and they do some interesting stuff with her character that's different than the original series, and she gets to make the most out of it. So, like, there's not a lot to dislike in terms of the performances and the characters in this show, which is, I think, a big difference than what we saw out of like Star Trek Picard, right?
I liked so much of Picard season 2, and then they didn't stick the landing, but that's another conversation.
So Strange New Worlds, I give it a full recommendation. I also want to talk about the production design. I think that they got the money to put the money on the screen. It's unlike like Picard, it is on a ship, right? They have built out sick bay, the one long corridor that they use for all different purposes. They have the mess hall. Engineering looks amazing, and one of the reasons they're able to do that is they're taking advantage of a volume like virtual production techniques. So they film in Toronto, I believe, and they work with, I think, Pixomondo is this effects house, and they have this half dome style volume. Engineering's the place where you can get the best sense of that, where the engineering they're in isn't this like confined area like in Next Generation. It's like this vast open, empty cavernous space with lights and all these things happening, and that's all illuminated in camera as they're using these LED screens that match the camera, and they very smartly glossed up the floor, and so you have this real nice real-time reflection from the background to also the foreground on the floor, and it just makes it feel like a real believable not green screen environment.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Have you watched Obi-Wan?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, okay, I don't know if you've already gone into this and if you've already addressed this, but it's like the thing that really I enjoyed the show, but the thing that really bothered me about Obi-Wan was I was just super aware of them acting on this stage, and I was like, where did all the money go for this series? Like, it it just felt like so obvious that they were always like acting on the stage. And I don't know, is it the lack of reflection on the floor? Like, do you know more about like what the difference is?
I think they did more locations with Obi-Wan. They're using fundamentally the same technology, and in fact, it was made popular by ILM and their volume. And there are scenes in Boba Fett and Mandalorian and Obi-Wan where they hide. You wouldn't. If someone told me, "Wow, that inside of that cantina was all fake," I wouldn't have believed it because they do effective. So, but I think it's like bad CG. The glaring when they do it poorly, it's more noticeable, and a lot of it's in like they try to create an open cave space or something, but everyone's kind of huddled in the same area, and so
Yeah.
like subconsciously you're like, well, that's not really, they can't go beyond there. All
Yeah.
the actions happening in the foreground, and so it's like they have to judiciously choose their shots, and they can't do super wide shots. Um, Star Trek, I think, they're not going to as many of those locations, and when they do go off planet in Strange New Worlds, they're just kind of shooting in, local Toronto, or they're actually just very Star Trek way, just finding interesting looking buildings and making that an alien world. So I think that it's about how they're using the virtual environments. Even a place like, outside the captain's his quarters or the mess hall, when they're in warp, that's all real effects and not CG, and all the lighting. I mean, the lighting in this show is it's this wonderful balance, I think, of the kind of fantastical, the colorful, 60s style, from like the Batman show, it's a Star Trek show, the kind of like they barn door all the lights. So you have these lights that go over actors' faces, and they have a little bit of that dramatic lighting in Strange New Worlds, but they don't overdo it. And it's, I think, a beautiful, beautifully shot show. So huge kudos to the production team for making it very believable. And yeah, I just love looking at the show. It's like it's a space I want to be in. It's like it has that great mid-century sensibility too. We're going to move on also with some more Star Trek talk. I want to give a shout out for collectors out there of Star Trek memorabilia, or maybe looking forward to Comic-Con coming up next week. Not really well known, but the company Tomy, Tomy, who they've been around for decades doing like children's toys. They have like their equivalent of a Kickstarter of a replica of the original series Enterprise at 1/350th scale, so 32 inches in die-cast metal. They're trying to raise the funds for people to collect it, and they're putting in LED lights and opening shuttle bay door shuttles. And it looks like they might not make their goal, but if listeners of the podcast are interested, I'll have a link to this crowdfunding campaign for a incredible replica of the Enterprise.
Yeah, 9 days to go.
Yeah,
they need to hit 2,500 basically like units ordered to get there, and they're like 60% of the way there, I would say.
The tracking does not look good, and it doesn't look like they'll be at Comic-Con to show it off. It would have been places to do it. Obviously, the big Star Trek Vegas convention that's around every year, but they were at a Chicago Star Trek convention a couple of weekends ago, and that's really the only place. So it's like a small passion project of this team within Tomy, and I think fans who like model makers and Star Trek fans want it to happen. It's just about getting enough people aware of it. We were also big fans of, if you collect like Star Trek ships, Eagle Moss was a UK company that did, like, they had magazine subscriptions where we got a small die-cast replica of, they've done hundreds of tiny ships from Star Trek over the years. And we just got a report this week that they have filed for administration in the UK, which is the equivalent of like Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the US, which is not a great sign. So things are kind of up in the air, especially for people who did their subscriptions to build their Enterprise D model that I've been working on, or the Ecto 1 or DeLorean. So, I'd be really sad to see this company go. They made great products, and I think it's just like COVID times and lockdown times, the print magazine business and subscription business just has not done well for them.
It's everything too. Like we're talking about I own like a small Eagle Moss DS9 station, but like they had cars and Marvel. It's everything, right?
Yeah. The ton of licenses, like they did James Bond car, like, and it's magazines in the UK are still a thing. Newsprint is still like part of the culture in the UK, less so much here, I think. And I think they just hit hard in distribution issues and And yeah, so we'll have to see if someone picks up the license or continues it. But they're always great to chat with and meet up with at Comic-Con and New York Comic-Con. So it'll be sad to see them go if they're not around. Something I'm excited about to see at Comic-Con, because I'll be there with Joey next Thursday, is Hasbro announced a really interesting initiative with Formlabs, the 3D printing company, where I think it's the dream of finally getting your own customizable or personalized action figure um, direct from a big company like Hasbro. So the product is called the Selfie line, the Selfie series, and the idea is that in their Hasbro Pulse app, this fall, you'll be able to, if you're in the States or just in the US, take pictures of yourself using your phone, send it to them, and they will deliver you in miniature 12th scale on a 6-inch figure, like on a Power Ranger, in a, as a Mandalorian, wearing, Princess Leia's Hoth outfit, like with licensed characters, or as a Ghostbuster. And they're going to be showing these essentially 3D printed in real time, made on demand head sculpts at Comic-Con next week. So I'm really curious about this.
So, what body is Norm's face going to end up on?
Good question. I'm debating. I mean, it's probably something in the Star Wars universe. They don't have a Star Trek license, so I'll take Stormtrooper. I'm sure they'll do Stormtrooper. Ghostbusters, I think, would be a no-brainer. Yeah, I love Ghostbusters.
That's what I would choose. Ghostbusters.
Yeah. And I'm really curious about like just the workflow, the digitalization, because there are a bunch of apps you can download right now that let you do kind of a photogrammetry. Have you guys tried that, where you can like scan an object, or especially with the new iPhones, right, that have the IR scanner on them? They're really good at mapping and scanning objects. So it's about how they can do this on a mass market scale, and we know the printers are good enough to they can do, the video they showed like 36 heads being printed at once. So they're priced at $60, which is a little pricey, but it's fully customized in terms of it being your face. And I'm just curious about the quality, so I can't wait to see those demoed at Comic-Con next week. That basically wraps it up for us. We have a bunch of videos on the site. We're finally releasing videos from our trip to What a Workshop back we did in the before times. So one of the last things that we did before the world shut down was Adam, Joey, and I went to visit What a Workshop in New Zealand, where they were building and developing their exhibition that they have. It's launched now in Auckland, called What a Workshop Unleashed. And we spent a week there filming a bunch of videos how they fabricated and designed and planned out this immersive experience. So those videos will be rolling out once a week over the coming weeks. We have more one-day builds. Adam recently rebuilt his R2-D2 dome and put big fiber optic lights in there. So please check that out. And then I also recently went to a event where I did some augmented reality demos, including, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. What do you guys think about smart contact lenses? Would you ever be comfortable putting a contact lens equivalent in your eye that has radio, a battery, and a tiny micro LED display in it? What would make you comfortable? What would get you comfortable enough to be able to do that?
What's the radio interacting with?
I guess it's they want it to be kind of like a heads-up display, where it can display information for like directions or fitness information or messaging on a tiny 15-degree field of view, currently monochrome display that is embedded, the whole form factor, in a contact lens.
I don't know about putting electrical energy sources in a water-based medium exposed to my face. So if they can prove that this isn't just a mini taser to my eye, I might be more intrigued. But no. Like it's my initial reaction.
It is. It's this thing that I think we take for granted in science fiction. Like, we see it as a thing. Oh, someone's going to put this contact lens in there, and it looks cool in science fiction. It's a matter of like, can it get go over the hurdle of like, the Google Glass thing, right? Like the
Mhm.
social resistance to it or just discomfort. Like, will we as a society ever get to a point where that just is something we take for granted as a comfortable thing, just like we have, batteries that we have on phones in our pockets all day?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really depends because, for instance, I only really use my Apple Watch when I exercise. Otherwise, I don't want to watch. I don't need that information. Like, it's not adding anything to me. And I have my phone on me all the time. So it's, for me, I'm not a great user for that, except when I'm exercising. But when thinking about that, it's like, well, would I want a contact lens heads up display for most of my life? Probably not. But I'm thinking about going to Antarctica, and there it's just so cold and you're in this puffy parka. And so you're like immobilized so much of the time. Like getting your phone out of your pocket, just doing anything there sucks and it's hard. And so I think like actually having a contact lens, like while I'm kind of unable to reach any of my devices and I kind of have to be hiking through extreme environments. I think in that situation, it could be totally useful because I would really appreciate not having to like get stuff out of my pockets, and even looking at my watch in that situation wouldn't work. Also would have the benefit of, you have to keep batteries and anything electric sort of really close to your body so that they stay warm and can keep working. So even if you have a watch outside of your body, or outside of, your central core, that'll get too cold and it'll stop operating. So I think it could be interesting for that. And I think, I think as long as it's safe enough, I'd be open to it, but perhaps that's also informed by the fact that, I was a contact wearer for many years of my life. And the stuff that I put in my eye, just out of like bad hygiene, being a teenager stuff, I'm just like, I'm lucky that like shit didn't get worse. So I'm kind of like, well, like there's way worse stuff that you can put in your eye. And bacteria is going to mess up your eye before anything else. So yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit more open-minded about the health aspects, as long as it, passes maybe some preliminary FDA
Absolutely.
hurdles or something.
Yeah, I think they're well aware of the safety concerns and the regulation around that, and using the same essential materials that contact lenses, FDA approved contact lenses are today. It's weird because they had their prototype, which they've tested in people's eyes. Their CEO has worn, and you can see the electronics. You can see like green PCB boards, and it actually blocks your fovea. So you can see if someone's wearing it, it looks like they have electronics in their eye. And so they also have to like create false color in the future to give people, change your, basically like people wearing contact lenses to change their eye color. They'll have to do that to mask the electronics. But this is like the fun science fiction stuff, right? That like it's science fiction storytelling driving companies to want to make this, to pursue what they think is going to be useful, and then until they actually make it and test it, we don't know from a user experience standpoint, like, does it actually make sense? Is this something that people will want? Is it, what industries is it going to actually be useful in? And is the technology going to be possible? So it's a cool little glimpse into the future that may or may not happen, but I mean, people are putting money behind it to test it out. So we'll have a video actually about that in the coming days. But that does it for our show this week. Ariel, thank you so much for joining this week and talking space telescopes, or what, the Jelly Welly Telly?
Jelly Welly Space Telly.
Jelly Welly Space Telly. We'll have links to where people can get dispatches from when you go on your trip back to Antarctica, as well as the latest updates for your book out there as well. Kishore, any other shout outs for you?
Nope, just up to my usual nonsense.
All right. Nonsense is what we're best at. And I'm not sure if we'll be back next week. I'll be down at Comic-Con. Maybe we'll do a post-Comic-Con report when I get back. I'm there just for a day trip, in and out real quick, just to see some folks. And in my post-travel quarantine, we can maybe do a podcast. But until then, thank you all so much for listening. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time.